Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1334A, and today's date is July 17th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Credit Cycle Has Shifted. The last time we saw this, you know what happened. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we are watching a slow decline, a slow implosion of the economy, not just here in the United States. We're seeing it all around the world. And we've watched the bubbles being blown up over the years. And we know this is what central banks do. They reinflate the economy, not in a natural, normal way, not in a way that it can be sustained. They do it in a way that benefits themselves. And what happens is that over time, these bubbles pop. And we've seen it over time. And there is a history of this. There is a pattern of this. And we started to look at the Canadian housing market, and we noticed that, yes, there are problems there. Prices have skyrocketed. They are just crazy right now. We're also seeing this here in the U.S. We're seeing it in Australia. But in Canada, it is pretty darn bad. Now, the Canadian Real Estate Association, they have come out and said that home sales in June posted their largest monthly drop since 2010. And the Greater Toronto market is leading the decline. Now, this is the third monthly decline in a row. Now, if we look at this, we can see that it is becoming a disaster. Now, we discussed the Canadian housing market before, where we know that interest rates are moving up. We know since 2010, the Canadian banking system decided to raise the rates. And we know there are certain laws that are going into place that is really going to, hammer the housing market. Right now, we're seeing Toronto existing home sales. They've dropped by 37.7% year on year. The average Toronto existing home price fell 5.8% month on month. Vancouver existing home sales, they dropped 12.2% year on year, and the prices have fallen 3.2%. And what we are seeing is that this is just a tiny drop, because as we've seen before, this housing bubble in Canada is almost twice the size as the U.S. bubble back in 2008. And when it fully deflates, when the whole thing just comes down, it's going to be a disaster. And we're going to see this in many different areas. Again, we've seen this before. This is nothing new. Now, of course, everyone's going to say, no, this will never happen. It's okay. Everything's going to be fine. Well, didn't they say that back in 2006, 2007, 2008? Didn't they say this going back to 2001, going back into the 90s, into the 80s, into the 70s, all the way back to 1929? They continually tell you that everything's going to be okay. This is normal. Everyone's just going to keep buying. No, this has been created by the central bank. It's an illusion. And the corporate media and the Fed and the U.S. government makes you think that this illusion is real. And what we've been seeing is that it is no way real whatsoever. It is a fake economy that we are living in right now. And when it falls apart, it's going to be disastrous. Now, Sears Canada, we know that basically Sears is bankrupt. We know that they're closing many, many stores. But this doesn't stop the executives, the management team, the senior management team from giving themselves a huge bonus. Now, according to court documents, Sears, which is going to be closing around 59 stores and eliminate 2,900 jobs across the country as part of a court-supervised restructuring process, will pay up to $7.6 million in retention bonuses to 43 executives and senior managers at the company in the head office in Toronto. Now, this is the same management team that led the company as sales plummeted and it spiraled into insolvency. So they are getting a bonus for destroying the corporation. And while they're doing this, they are laying off thousands of individuals. And this just goes to show you we have problems here in Canada, the US, with all these corporations because it seems like they always reward these individuals for doing a terrible job. And all those individuals that are getting laid off, well, they get nothing. Actually, the workers, they're telling them they cannot afford a severance package for them. And one of the workers say, well, but you have enough money to give yourself bonuses, but you don't have enough money to give us a severance package? I mean, when we calculate this out, each one of these executives, they're getting $176,000. This is what their bonus is going to be. I mean, it's unbelievable what is happening here. Now, Illinois is a complete disaster, and we know that they are having problems all over the place. And the Millennials, they are leaving Illinois. They're just packing up and fleeing the state, and this is going to be a problem because remember, this is the next generation. This is the generation that's supposed to be purchasing homes in this state. This is the generation that's going to be bringing in tax revenue into the state. And when we look at this, well, they're just leaving. Illinois lost 80,700 millennial taxpayers and their dependents to other states on a net over tax years of 2011 to 2012 through 2014 to 2015, according to the Internal Revenue Service data. Now, Illinois, their net loss of millennial taxpayer and their dependents over that 4-year period of time ranked the second worst in the nation. The first state is New York with 136,800 net loss. And this is not going to help the state whatsoever. And we're starting to see that, a lot of these states, not just Illinois, we're looking at Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and many others, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And don't forget, a lot of states, they have a pension crisis headed their way. We see auto defaults. Well, they're soaring to the post-crisis highs, even as equity markets continue to shrug off this bad data. They don't care. It doesn't make a difference to them. Everything is fine. But what we're seeing right now is that there's more and more individuals that are defaulting on their auto loans. Delinquencies, they are skyrocketing now, and we can see the economic data. It is just getting worse and worse and worse. And out in the corporate media, they're trying to make us believe that there's tons and tons of job openings, but we just can't find qualified workers to work in these jobs. Well, we have 100 million people that are looking for jobs. We have many others that are in part-time jobs that would like to have a full-time job. But what's very interesting about this, and for those who worked in the corporate world, you understand that there are departments that have open recs. Now, they leave these recs open. Even though there's a hiring freeze, they still interview people because eventually they don't want to lose these open recs. So they interview people, but they can't give anyone a job. Secondly, we've been watching the wage growth basically slow and decline. Now, wages are continually declining, and when you cannot find qualified workers, when there's a shortage, well, it's not an employer market, it's an employee market where, listen, you can't find qualified people? Well, I'm qualified, and the salary that you're asking is not enough. And we've seen this back in the past, where in the tech boom, they couldn't find qualified people. They couldn't find database people. They couldn't find webmasters. They couldn't find Windows administrators. And what they did is they kept raising the salary until they found those qualified people, because there was a shortage of those individuals. They're telling us there's a shortage, so they should be raising the wages right now. But there's a problem. They're not raising the wages for these positions. So something is off here. Something doesn't make sense once again. And we can see that most likely it's this data. It's the lie that there's so many jobs that are open right now. They just can't find these individuals. And they were never going to fill these positions in the first place because there's a hiring freeze, which a lot of corporations do. I mean, as they're laying off individuals, they're not going to be hiring people. They usually put a freeze on hiring when they're laying off. And this is what we've been seeing. And remember, we've been seeing a lot of retail, a lot of corporate office in the retail sector laying off individuals. So all these people, they would like to get another high-paying job. And they've been working in the industry for a very long time. So they should be qualified for some type of job, especially in the corporate offices, in the tech, in the management area, in the finance area. These people should be pretty darn qualified. But again, individuals are still having a trouble trying to find work. Now, the Empire State Manufacturing, this survey, well, it has tumbled in July. Hope plunged. And again, this soft data, well, it's dropping, but it's moving up a little bit. And the hard data is just crashing. And it looks like there's a little manipulation going on in the soft data to make everyone believe that everything is fine. But we see new orders, employment inventory, shipments, and an average work week all plunged in July. And what's very interesting is, what do you believe, the soft data or the real hard data? And the hard data is collapsing right now. Bank of England is warning of a bigger systemic risk now than in 2008. The Bank of England Prudential Regulation Authority, they're very concerned about what is happening here. Banks are accused of balance sheet trickery, undermining spirit of post-08 rules. EU and UK corporate bond markets may be bigger source of instability than in 08. Credit card debt and car loan surge could cause another financial crisis. And banks are returning to similar practices to those that sparked the 08 crisis. Yes, nothing has changed since 08. We're in this fake illusionary economy. They use stress tests. They tell you everything is fine. We're not going to see another crisis in our lifetime. All these are lies, because we've been looking at all of this data, and all of this data that is coming in, we are equal to or worse off than 08. And all these regulations that they put into place as of 2008, it wasn't to help the people. It was to help the banks. The banking regulation that was put into place was to help the banking system, not to help each and every individual. And what we're seeing right now is what we saw back in 08 or prior to 08. The credit cycle is turning for the worse. Delinquency rates are creeping up in the consumer loan and commercial industrial loan space. There's a clear signal that both the consumer and corporate sectors of the economy are beginning to run out of steam. In response to this, banks are pulling back on lending. And what we're seeing right now is they are loaning less. Loan originations have dropped dramatically, and they are going back to the 2008-2009 time period. And the economy is showing signs of stalling. So banks, they're pulling the plug right now. The last time both of these issues came to rise was in 2007. And we know what happened in 2008. We know exactly what is going on here. We're seeing the same exact signs. And what is happening here is that Trump at this point is preparing for this collapse. Now, there's a lot to do as this collapse approaches. All these programs that have been spawned by the Obama regime, the Bush regime, the Clinton regime, they have to be dismantled right now. And the Trump administration, well, they're cutting down their own budget by $22 million. Now, this is a huge deal, especially because they had set a careful budget for themselves to begin with. The savings comes from a cut in the amount spent on Michelle Obama's budget as First Lady, an end to the large number of czars and so-called fellowships that Obama employed. There's a smaller White House workforce. And after the White House released its annual budget report last week, the president of government watchdog group OpenTheBooks.com compared the newly reported budget to the last 2 years of the Obama administration. He noted that there are now 110 fewer White House employees since Obama left office, saving $5 million alone. Also, the First Lady's staff has been cut from 24 staffers to only 5. Michelle Obama entered the White House with a staff of 22, costing nearly $2 million annually, up from $1.4 million spent during George W. Bush. Another area of savings was the elimination of the so-called policy czars, with which Obama stocked the White House staff. The Trump budget shows not a single czar employed for 2017. He also ended the Obama's shady fellowship positions. Some of these fellowship candidates in the Obama administration made up around something like $158,000 annually. So what is happening right now is that each part of the government is going to be cutting, because when this reset comes, there is going to be no funds for this. Everything's going to have to be reset, and this large government, which is employing a lot of people, a lot of these people are going to lose their jobs. And a lot of these jobs are duplicates of the same job. And we're going to see this cut down quite a bit. Now, the central bankers, they are very worried about what he is doing right now. The EU lawmakers, the central bankers out in the EU, they're looking at this saying, well, wait a minute. First, it was free trade. Now, it's the Paris Climate Agreement. And the next phase is to deregulate these banking requirements. Now, remember, these regulations that were put into place, it was to better the banking system. It wasn't to help the everyday person. It wasn't really to help the economy. And these central bankers realize this, and they understand that if he removes a lot of this, a lot of these banks are going to go down. And what they're saying right now is that he has this anti-globalist agenda. Yeah, he does have this anti-globalist agenda. And these central bankers, they're saying that since he's taking on this anti-globalist agenda, it threatens to erode years of cooperation on financial regulations forged after the 2008 crisis. The European Parliament members are traveling to Washington this week to meet with top lawmakers and other officials where they can air their concerns about the U.S. commitment to international rules. The meetings come amid moves by Trump administration and Congress to roll back bank regulations. Now, in July 12th, a speech that was given by the governor of France's central bank, he said the following: "Such changes would be completely different and would be a source of great concern for all. Any temptation of competitive deregulation would be a lose-lose game, which would increase the risk of new financial crisis. International cooperation on financial sector regulation is our common good." And what they're worried about is when he does this, and he does many other things, and the entire economy starts to come down itself, the system's going to fall apart. But the system's falling apart anyhow. These central bankers, once again, they're trying to maintain and control the aspect of how this whole thing is going to be brought down. They want the narrative. And if you start breaking apart, it's going to expose how weak these banks really are, and how they've been propped up, and how these banks have really been operating. We know they're using tricky accounting methods. We know that they're lying, that these stress tests aren't real. And this is what they're very nervous about. And what is happening right now, it's called dismantling the fake economy and letting the real economy shine through. And this is not going to be a pretty picture. It's going to be an absolute disaster, because once all this information comes out, once the real economy is exposed, the economy is going to implode on itself, because there's nothing there of substance. Just like when they exposed Enron, everyone thought, oh, look at this company, it's doing fantastic. It's one of the fastest growing companies, and it's incredible. And then you peel back the layers, and what did you see? Manipulation. An illusion created by certain individuals. Bernie Madoff, the same exact thing. The Illinois Pension Fund, manipulating numbers. You peel all that back, you find out, oh my God, there's nothing there. Go back to 2008. When they started to peel back the subprime securities, these individuals who looked into them and said, wait a minute, these aren't real. These aren't AAA. This is below garbage. That's how bad it is. And there's no way that this economy can stay afloat. It's impossible. These things are going to crash. And of course, everyone laughed. And then what happened? Well, the truth was exposed, and everything fell apart. We are going to see the same thing once again. When it's all peeled back, and when you see what really has been done, you're going to realize this economy is fake, and it's going to start to implode. And it's going to be a domino effect, and it's going to hit other sectors and other sectors, and before you know it, the whole thing just falls apart. This is why you need to be ready and prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.